The Shawshank Redemption is a 1994 American drama film. It tells the story of Andy Dufresne, a successful banker who's arrested for the murders of his wife and her lover. Andy is sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences at the Shawshank State Prison, which is well known because no prisoner has ever successfully managed to escape out of it alive. The prison houses many inmates who have spent more time inside the jail than they've spent outside of it. The outside world has changed significantly in the time span of their prison sentence, and they're all unaware of the life that has continued on without them outside the prison. After entering Shawshank Prison, Andy doesn't talk to anyone for a long time. One day he meets a prisoner named Red, who's a smuggler of illegal items inside the jail. Just like Andy, Red was sentenced to life imprisonment and has been in prison for 20 years. Andy tells Red that he needs a rock hammer and a large poster of an actress named Rita Hayworth. Red asks Andy if his intention is to use that hammer to dig a tunnel in the prison, because a simple rock hammer will take him years to do so, and it's simply impossible to escape out of it. Andy assures Red that he will understand once the hammer arrives. After befriending each other, Red warns Andy about a group of prisoners named Sisters, who have their eyes set on him. At Andy's behest, Red orders a hammer for him, and when he gets the hammer, Red says to himself, it will take 600 years to make a tunnel in the prison with this hammer. Andy's fond of carving stones, and it seems he wanted this hammer to continue his hobby. Andy has started to fit in among the other prisoners and life inside of the prison. But one night, Andy falls into the hands of those 3 prisoners who had filthy eyes on him. Despite going through such trauma, Andy never complained about it to anyone. There are bruises all over Andy's body and a strange silence on his face. One day, some prisoners are chosen to repair the roof. Red and Andy are among those. In charge at this place is Hadley, who seems a little upset. He tells his comrades that he inherited $30,000 from his brother, but the money is of no use since most of it will go to the government in the form of tax. Andy and his friends also listen to Hadley's conversation. Then Andy goes to Hadley and asks him whether or not he'd trust his wife. Upon hearing this, Hadley gets infuriated. He grabs Andy and takes him to the edge of the terrace. But before Hadley can throw him down, Andy tells him that the government has a rule according to which any person can gift up to $60,000 to his wife in his entire lifetime, and there is no tax of any kind of this money. Being a banker before his imprisonment, Andy offers to help Hadley legally keep his inherited money for free. In return, Andy asks him to give him 3 beers to all of his friends, and the next day we all see Andy's friends enjoying a beer on the terrace. This means that Andy was able to help Hadley keep his $30,000. A few days later, a movie is shown to all the prisoners in the jail. Andy walks out of that room and then he gets ambushed by his assaulters. They want to abuse him once again, but this time Andy retaliates, and in return, he gets badly beaten up. Andy gets extremely injured and gets hospitalized, and the one who injured Andy is put in solitary confinement for 1 week. A week later, when he returns to his cell, he sees that office Hadley had been waiting for him. Hadley beats him so badly that he's left crippled for the rest of his life. A few days later, the warden out of the jail, Samuel Norton, wants to check Andy's cell. But in reality, searching the cell is just an excuse. He wanted to meet Andy because Officer Hadley told him how Andy saved his $30,000. Andy has a Bible in his hand, which the warden takes from him. Norton says that he too has faith in the Bible. Andy's prison cell is filled with photos of several actors, and among them there's a large poster of Rita Hayworth. The warden says that he usually doesn't allow this, but in some special cases, it can be ignored. Norton is impressed by Andy, so he invites him to his office and makes him an assistant librarian. There's an old man in the library who's been handling the library for many years, and Andy has to work under him. As the years go by, Andy has more work to do, so he makes his friend Red his assistant. One day, the librarian under whom Andy works puts a knife to a man's neck. Actually, the government has waived the librarian's sentence, but he doesn't want to leave the jail. He's completed 50 years in the prison. To him, the life of the prison is his real life. He feels that if he kills someone, then his punishment will increase and he'll be kept in this jail. But upon Andy and Red's persuasion, the old librarian, Brooks, releases the man and decides not to commit another crime. After being released from jail, Brooks really feels strange. The outside world has changed a lot in 50 years. Where earlier there was 1 car on the road, now there's a crowd of vehicles. In this fast-paced life, Brooks is unable to survive and he takes his own life. Next, we see that Norton has launched a new program in the Shawshank Prison. The name of this program is In Out, where prisoners of the jail will be taken out for work so that they can know how to earn money by hard work. But through this program, Norton has exploited cheap prison labor, profiting by undercutting skilled labor costs and receiving bribes. Norton acquires a lot of black money. To help Norton launder his black money, Andy makes him business partners with a person who's not even real. They create fake documents in the name of Randall Stevens and transfer all the money to his account, so that if the police find out about this, then the police will be looking for a man who has never been born in this world. Next, we see that a new prisoner comes into the jail whose name is Tommy. But when he learns that Andy has helped many people here, he goes to him and tells him that he wants to complete his high school. So after getting out of jail, he can live a good life and be with his wife and child. So Andy helps him pass his GED exam. One day, Tommy goes to Red and inquires why Andy is in jail since he's so intelligent and kind. Red tells him that he had murdered his wife and his wife's lover. Hearing this, Tommy stays silent without uttering any words. The next moment, he's in front of Andy and Red, and Tommy tells them that he once had a cellmate in another prison who had a very interesting story. The cellmate that Tommy is referring to once broke into a house to steal, but the owner of the house woke up, so he killed the owner and his wife. Later, he came to know that the couple he killed were not married, and the woman he killed was the wife of a very successful banker. And later on, the banker was convicted of the murder which he committed, so Andy was innocent all along. Hearing this, Andy goes to Norton and tells him the story, but Norton deliberately refuses to believe him. Since Andy helps him launder his money, he knows all of his secrets. Andy assures Norton that he won't tell anyone about what happens inside the jail, but Norton takes it as a threat and puts Andy in solitary confinement for a month. Moreover, he invites Tommy to have a conversation. While Tommy believes that Norton is going to help Andy, Norton actually makes it look like Tommy was escaping out of the prison and he was shot dead. By killing Tommy, Norton is trying to make sure Andy never leaves the Shawshank prison. Norton then goes to Andy and tells him that Tommy tried to run away, and that's why he was shot. Andy knows that he's lying. He tells Norton that he won't be working for him any longer. But then Norton threatens to destroy the library, remove Andy's protection from the guards, and move him to the worst conditions. So Andy has no option but to relent to Norton. After spending 2 full months in the dungeon, Andy is finally out. Andy asks Red, will he ever be able to get out of this prison? Red says that maybe when he gets too old and his brain stops working, then he'll get out. Andy says that he'll leave this place and go to Zihuatanejo. He says that this is a very beautiful place by the sea in Mexico. It is said that a person loses himself there. He says that he will open his restaurant there, he'll repair his boat on the seashore, and will go fishing with his friends in the deep sea. Red's a little skeptical hearing this. He says that hope is a very dangerous thing. It drives a person crazy. He further tells Andy that he must return to the world of truth and that Mexico is far from here. Andy tells him that he's right. Now he only has 2 paths. Either he lives this miserable life or he dies. Before leaving, Andy tells Red to promise him to do one thing for him. He tells Red that there's a huge field in Buxton where there's a big tree. There's a stone wall near that tree and a black stone on that wall. Andy further tells Red that there's something buried under that stone. Andy asks Red to promise him to go to that place once he gets out of there. Red asks what's behind the stone, and Andy says that he'll find out when he goes there. After finishing Norton's work, he keeps all of his documents in a special safe. After placing the documents, Norton gives his clothes to Andy and asks him to iron them and polish his shoes so that they shine like a mirror. After this, Andy comes back to his cell. The same night, Red seems very upset because he thinks that Andy might commit suicide. In the morning, when the doors of the cells open, Andy does not come out of the cell, and when the guards approach his cell, he's completely shocked. Next, we see that Norton takes out his shoebox to wear his shoes, but the box contains Andy's shoes, not his. The siren sounds indicating that Andy has escaped. Norton goes to check Andy's cell and calls Red for questioning. Warden asks Red about Andy's whereabouts. To this, Red says he does not know anything. Norton gets really furious as no one has any answers on how Andy escaped out of the prison cell without anybody noticing. Out of anger, he throws a little piece of rock at the wall poster, and to his surprise, the rock goes through the poster. Curious as to where the rock went, Norton puts his hand into the poster, and then he sees that Andy has built a huge tunnel there. Seeing this, everyone is surprised because that wall is very strong. It's almost impossible to make such a tunnel without a machine. But Andy made the impossible possible and ran away. After this, all the guards run to the side from where Andy came out. There they find Andy's old clothes, a soap, a comb, and a hammer that Andy got from Red 20 years ago. This is the same hammer that Andy was using to make a tunnel in the wall for the past 20 years. Whatever dirt came out of the wall, he kept in his pockets and he scattered it in the ground. When Andy last worked for the warden, he kept all the documents of Norton's black money with him, and the Bible that he kept it in Norton's safe. Norton does not know about this. The clothes that the warden gave him to press, Andy wore them inside his clothes, and also the shoes that the warden gave him to polish, Andy wore them as well. At night, as soon as all the lights of the prison were turned off, he came out of the tunnel. After this, he broke the gutter pipe, crawled into it, and got out of the jail from where no prisoners had escaped to date. However, the gutter pipe that Andy crawled to is equal to 2 football grounds, but somehow he managed to get out. The next morning, Andy goes to the bank where Norton's black money is kept. The money is in the name of Norton's fake business partner, Randall Stevens. Actually, Andy used to sign for this fake person from jail. Andy has all the documents in the name of that man, and that's why Andy assumes the identity of Randall Stevens and withdraws all the money. This money is around $2.95 million, which means that Andy is not only free, but he's also very rich. Andy has all the documents of the black letters from Norton, which he then sends to the press. The next morning, Norton's history of illegal business is made public to the newspapers, and when Norton opens the safe, it does not contain his documents, but the Bible which Andy left for him. On the first page of the Bible, Andy has left a note for Norton saying that you were right, salvation is truly in this book. And when Norton turns the page, he sees that there's a hammer mark. Andy had cut the page in the shape of a hammer and made it in a place inside which he hid his hammer. 20 years ago, today, when the warden first went to Andy's cell and took Andy's Bible from his hands, even at that time, the hammer was in the same Bible. Now the whole truth of Norton has been exposed. The police are coming to arrest him, but before the police can do so, Norton shoots himself. After some time, Andy's friend Red's sentence is also waived. He gets a job, but Red doesn't seem to have any interest in the outside world because he spent over 40 years of his life in jail. Red also lives in the same room where librarian Brooks used to live, and Red also wants to kill himself. But then he remembers the promise he made to Andy. He goes to that field where there's a big tree. There's a wall of stones, and there's a black stone on that wall, just like Andy had explained. When Red picks up that stone, there's a box under it. Inside the box are a letter and some money. The letter is from Andy asking Red to come to the place where he once told him about, which is Zihuatanejo. Next to this, Andy wrote, "Hope is a good thing, but the best of all things and a good thing never dies." After this, Red reaches that place, and when he gets to the seashore, he sees Andy sitting in the boat fixing it. This place and everything here happens to be Andy's dream that he had shared with Red in jail. Perhaps hope is the best thing in the world. Thanks to this hope, Andy not only made a tunnel in 20 years, but he also got everything he wanted in his life. Thanks so much for watching. If you like this video, please leave a like and also don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more movie recaps.